Good morning, gentlemen. It's your humble vassal, Professor J. Mark, for the Kingmaker series in the Emperor's Club. We're on chapter 10, and this chapter is about education. This is dear to my heart. My life changed when one of my, oh God, what is it? Sunday school teachers, yes. She taught me math also, but as a Sunday school teacher, she told me to read the Proverbs, one every single day. And I went home Sunday and started reading one chapter a day, but I read the whole book twice. It was mind-blowing what was written in Proverbs. To this day, I make an effort to read Proverbs. If I read my Bible, it'll be Proverbs. And in it, Solomon had said in Proverbs 4, chapter 13, he said that your education is your life. And I was like, oh my God, if the wisest man on earth says your education is your life, that right there told me the value of education. And I knew the value of education because a lot of my family members are educators. And my mother is a librarian. So the value of education has always been around me. It was a way of life. But when I read this, my value of education became my own. Not just because I was surrounded by it, because of the elders around me. And I made this one of my maxims. Your education is your life. And my mind, excuse me, it just went on something my teacher had said, the library in junior high. When she said that every book you read is like lighting a candle in a dark room. And she had said that make sure you read enough books that the light in your mind is bright enough to be seen from heaven. And I was like, oh my God. I always love reading. To this day, I still read. I barely watch TV. I have to force myself to watch television, with the exception of the newest. Excuse me. And that has been my goal from then, from junior high, way back 83, 86. To make sure that my mind is illuminated so brightly that it can be seen from space. No, I'm not asking you to take it as seriously as that, but that's what I did. But that's how serious I took my education. And the importance for education was revealed to me in Harlem. I think it's Lenox Boulevard or Malcolm X Boulevard. When I saw a plaque that said, an educated man is equal to 1,000 uneducated men. Gentlemen, I could end chapter 10 on that. An educated man is equal to 1,000 uneducated men. That's it. I mean, really and truly, there's nothing else left to say. It really is. There's nothing else left to say. Your education is your life. Guard it well. Excuse me. Now, I was taught by my sister's math teacher in junior high that once you graduate your basic education, learning doesn't stop. Your basic education, she said, is to teach you how to teach yourself so that you'll be a lifelong learner. And that's what I've been doing. My library literally is filled with books on topics from A to Z. So, I live to go to the library or the bookstore, or my slice of heaven is the used bookstore. Or when I'm in New York, the guys who sell books on the side of the road. I always find jewels there, arcane wisdom, which ignites a supernova blast in my mind to study new fields of information. Excuse me. So my idea of fun is going to the library, the bookstore, a book convention, used bookstore, because I'm going to be learning something new. I look forward to learning something new. That is something my teacher had said. I think it was my literature teacher. That she said this, that to go to bed as ignorant as you awoke is an insult to God, because He gave you put a very sophisticated machine between your ears, and your job with being blessed with this machine is to give it something new to feed on every single day. So to me, my education was never about getting a degree or getting a job. It was being a lifelong learner, to learn something new every day. I make that my goal from I was a child, to learn something new every day. And what is funny, my nephew had added up the cost of my magazines that I would say collected from 1994 to this present day. I spent about $20,000 on magazines, on varying subjects. And he was like, "But what are you into? I'm keeping all these, this, that." I said, well, it grabbed my attention when I went in the bookstore. So I studied it. And anything that intrigues me, I go into depth in it. As far as studying the history of it, the person behind it. Like, for example, I was reading The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. In it, I learned that in Sweden, you're allowed to have an assault rifle and a handgun, but not a 1911. And I was like, well, hold on. You can have a 1911 handgun, but you can own an assault rifle? That didn't make sense to me. So I went to the bookstore, the library, online, Amazon, Half.com, eBay, all these different places, to find out what is so special about this 1911. And I came upon the most extraordinary mind ever, John Moses Browning. So my need to figure out what's so special in 1911 led me into the study of John Moses Browning. A consummate genius. If you want to, you can check out his work. That is a brilliant mind. He has a brilliant mind. And that right there made me realize how powerful the human mind is, and that we should not take our education for granted, because we don't know what we are capable of or what skills we have. And that's the purpose of this chapter on the education. You don't know what skills you have lying dormant in you. Because from studying the genius, I call him Saint John Moses Browning, I got into gunsmithing. Because my niece asked why was I into guns like this? Because I never was. But from studying the 1911 and John Moses Browning, I got into it. Am I a gun aficionado? No, I just want to collect 1911s for the sake of it, especially the ones that are engraved. And that's another thing. Studying about reading The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo led me to study the 1911, led me to John Moses Browning, led me to collecting magazines on 1911s, to getting collectors 1911, the actual handgun, and getting it engraved. Now, that's my thing. I'm into engraving now. I want everything I have in metal to be engraved. So I studied it, but I realized I don't have time to do it. I'll pay someone to do that. I don't have the time to learn it, to get some level of mastery to do it. I'll pay someone to do that. But the point is, just from reading The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, I went down the rabbit hole and learned so much more. So it may be, I won't call it useless information. It may not be information I use every single day, but I learned something new. I learned something about the human mind. When you give your mind something to feed on, and you continuously do it, something simple connects the dot between everything that you have been collecting that seem to have no way at all of being connected. I can't explain it per se because it's too long and involved. But the point is, make sure you value your education, you take your education seriously, and you become a lifelong learner. And you become friends with the library, the bookstore, the used bookstore, and if you have them in your city, the gentlemen who sell books on the side of the street. They sell books you don't find in the bookstore or in your traditional bookseller. All right, let's see where am I? Oh. All right, that's about it, gentlemen. Oh, yes, the value of education. This is the true value of education. This is why it's included in the Kingmaker series, because in the same place in Harlem, I actually bought the plaque. I bought the first plaque where an educated man is equal to 1,000 uneducated men. I came across another plaque that I kept on the wall in my house in New York. That an educated populace makes a strong country. Excuse me. And in the Empress Club, strength is valued. You're not going to be a liability in the Empress Club. You're going to have to value education, and you have to be a lifelong learner. Excuse me. Both of those plaques, they were written by Englishmen. I can't remember who it was. This was 20 years ago. I can't even find the plaques. Anyway, let's get long story short. I always wondered how this little England was able to conquer the world. I mean, it didn't make sense to my mind as a child, because, you know, as a child, you think size equals strength. So when you look at the map and you compare England to France and Spain and all these other countries, England is more or less a pebble. And it fascinated me on how they were able to take over the world. Two things, excuse me, helped me make the connection. One, watching Shogun. I watched Shogun. I think I was in '86. I think so, the miniseries. I love that. That made me read the book twice. It was that good. In it, the Englishman, or the Anjin-san, the captain, the pilot, whatever you want to call him, when he was before one of the kings, the local kings, he had an opportunity to save his life by discrediting the Jesuits. And he explained what the Jesuits were doing when the Pope put a line of demarcation along the world, in which one part belonged to England, one part belonged to Spain. And he recounted everything he learned in class to the Japanese leader. And the Japanese leader turned to the Jesuit priest and asked him, "Is this true?" And now while the Japanese leader and the Jesuit priest were going back and forward with everything the Englishman had said, the Englishman was saying to himself, "Thank you, Lord." He thanked God that his teachers, his father, the gentlemen on the boats beat this education into him. He didn't take school seriously, but they beat it into him, and he was thankful for it. When I read those two plaques, that one educated man is equal to 1,000 uneducated men, and an educated populace makes a strong country, it clicked. That's one example of how things that are random just click, and everything makes sense. We just keep feeding the brain, and then all of a sudden, something's going to click, and you get to make sense, a whole lot of sense of things that didn't look like they were related. It dawned on me, because my mind thought about the Anjin-san when he explained to the Japanese leader what the Jesuit priests were doing back in Europe, when they decided that the Spaniards or the Portuguese have the right to Japan and China. And he thanked God for his education, and he was grateful that it was beaten into him. Now, I don't admonish you beat education into a child. I say make it enjoyable so they love doing it. They associate learning with pleasure. And anyway, it dawned on me then, that is how England, that small country, was able to take over the world. Because they value their education. They believe in educating their people. So in the Emperor's Club, excuse me, education is king. Education is gold. Education is trump. The trump card. I mean, in this environment, you can't say that. But anyway, our education is your trump card. It's one educated man is equal to 1,000 uneducated men. An educated populace is equal. Well, an educated populace makes a strong country. If it hasn't dawned on you yet, the Emperor's Club is not about being mediocre. If that clue escaped you, the Kingmaker should have made you aware that this is not a club for mediocrity. We're here about turning boys into men, men into leaders, agents of change, and shapers of destiny. And you can't do that being uneducated. You can't do it being a worshiper of ignorance. If you want to worship ignorance, please do it somewhere else. I didn't say you can't do it. Just do it over there. Not here. We're about change. We're about reshaping destiny. All right, gentlemen. Thank you for your time, and I appreciate that. I got to get to work. Now, the next chapter, 11, is going to be on now. And that means no other way. There's no other way to do a thing than now. Catch you on the flip side. I got to go sing for my supper.